When we are facing what my interpretation of sankharas that are fueled by the defilements, so they can come at you in the form of persistent and really negative thoughts that can be just there for the sole purpose of being vulgar or being detrimental to yourself. First of all, is that really like unwholesome karma, or is it just like is it creating unwholesome karma? Is it a fruit of unwholesome karma? And what do we do in order to be with that? Is being with that the best thing to do, or should we try and use any sort of restraint for that sort of thought?
Mm. Mm. A very good question, I think. Sankharas. This is one of the more complex principles of the Dhamma that people have been trying to pin down, narrow, or simplify. But I've noticed that there's a tendency to attribute sankharas to karma, related to karma, pure and simple. It's just karma, and specifically karma from the past. And this, I think, has a lot to do with Venerable Buddhaghosa's interpretation of, more than interpretation, the division he did with the Paticcasamuppada, where he broke the Paticcasamuppada, the 12 links of causal relations, conditionality of phenomena and experience, into 3 lifetimes. So the sankharas ended up in the past lifetime, because you have avidya, then you have sankharas, then you have vijnanas. Okay, so those two especially, they're basically, they have been interpreted in a way where they are essentially not in your hands. You have nothing to do with them, basically, and you just have to deal with it, type of a thing. There is some truth to that, but this is not, for me, given my own upbringing, religious, etc., it takes away the freedom that I possess in doing something with it, in the face of it, instead of having to just sit there and just take it. There is definitely a direction that you can take when the sankharas are experienced. That, to me, takes away that completely being susceptible to the sankharas type of a situation, which is what they have interpreted as complements of the commentator tradition, which is what we have in Theravada. And that's how it trickled down over the centuries. So, the detrimental qualities, as you described, of the sankharas. So yes, there is the kammic weight they possess, but it's not just that. One can therefore say the same thing about the sannyas, the perceptions, who said they're not affected by the past actions. Or the way you have you can call it natural tendency to lean towards one feeling over the other. And that's also from the past. Why can't we talk about the Vedana like that? Or the tendency to lust after certain things. That's raga, or at least lobha, defilements. From where? In the heart. Okay, so the defilements. So they also can be a remnant from the past, and that's completely legitimate. And then you have a person who's quote unquote, naturally inclined towards anger, whether it's self-hate or hating others, that is also beyond just mere sankhara. So I've noticed that especially with meditators over the years, again, those that have been highly influenced by the Mahasi and everyone else from the commentary tradition, or you can, the Vipassana groups and all that, which is wrongly coined term, I think. Groups cannot call themselves, we are Vipassana groups. It doesn't work like that. It's highly individualized. You cannot belong to a membership, type of a thing, a club, even a religion that is a Vipassana religion, or but that's on the side. But I've noticed that in such groups, they speak so openly about sankharas, it almost makes them sound like they're deep. The person using those terms makes them a little bit more sophisticated. Far from it. There's absolute ignorance of sankharas there, because sankharas are very much alive. They have very little to do, as far as I'm concerned, as a meditation teacher, as a practitioner, as anyone who's gone through life's difficult phases like everyone else. I see that this is a living process. Yes, you can glorify, you can highlight and pretty much live with the past and the memories of the past, but you essentially are living in the present. Yes, it does have a tremendous impact on you, the past, etc. But I notice that many individuals will attribute too much to the sankharas. And then, this is the kicker, I guess you could say. It's all up in the air as to how the sankharas are supposed to be dealt with. One day, some miraculous day, the clouds are going to open up and suddenly the sankharas are just going to be gone because of a certain attainment, a certain event that happens. Meanwhile, the event is happening all the time, but people aren't aware of it. Now, what I mean by that is, there's a choice. Yes, we all have tendencies. Yes, you all have, let's say, earlier the noise from the traffic outside was coming in. What did we do? We closed the window. Did you stop the noise? Did you go outside, run to the street, yell at the truck driver and say, "Stop it. Stop it. We're trying to have a Dhamma discussion upstairs"? No, because it doesn't work like that. But what you can do is you can address it with the means that are available to you at the moment. There you go. You have addressed it, given the availability of tools you have. Now sometimes, so if you noticed, I am trying to open up the sphere of, or the label, or the roof, or the ceiling of what we call sankharas, and allow it to really be identified as something much more pervasive than a sankhara as a thing. It's part of the 5 aggregates, Lord Buddha talks about the Panchupadana Khanda, the grabbing aggregates, or the 5 aggregates of grasping, sometimes translated. When are you grasping it? When are you grasping these aggregate things? In the past or in the present? So, sankharas are not separate things that are happening to you. You are on the receiving end of them. That has to, that's a wrong view right there. There's no samaditi there. There's michaditi. There's wrong view. And that is what the Dhamma is for. To address the wrong view, so we eradicate those wrong views and In their stead, we will have right view. Understanding is that. It gives you back the dignity that belongs to you to make choices with your life, to close the window. If it's too chilly outside and you have to go outside, then if you only have, one, t-shirt, you're wearing a t-shirt, and it calls for you to wear, I don't know, a trench coat or something, a thicker material, you won't do that. So for that, I'm using analogies and similes and metaphors here, of course, but one of them is the breath meditation. It's so neutral. There's nothing happening there. There's nothing exciting that happens there. That's why a lot of people don't like to practice breath meditation unless because they want to have some emotionality attached to things. That's why people gravitate towards things that have color, literally color, like paintings, yantras and things like that, or in Tantric Buddhism. Why is it so famous in most parts of the world, especially Western parts of the world? Because it allows you to be amused. So you drop, so it's still better than the Sankara, one would say, but you're basically, it's like a hot potato, playing hot potato. You are trying to reduce the passions by going after a little bit lesser passions, but passions nevertheless. It keeps you animated, keeps you still, connected with something that is not as boring as the breath. Why boring? Well, at least it would appear to, because it pulls you out from the passion-filled life that we are always exposed to. The ups and downs. Passion doesn't mean sensuality always. Passionate approaches, passionate drives, getting hot, let's say, with your emotionality, feeling affection, that's passion, angry, sad, depressed, anguished, anxiety, perplexed, worried, hurt. These are all within the capacity of passion. Well, that is a fertile soil for sankharas to reside in. They don't want to leave such a wonderful arena. It accommodates for them to be there. Now, why did I bring in the breath meditation? Because it is neutral. If you are present truly to the breath, observing the nama rupa aspect. Rupa, it would be the physical touch, where the breath is happening. So it touches the skin. Or in some traditions, you feel the belly pushing against the clothing that you're wearing as it bellows and just increases in size and shrinks, etc. Like a bellowing motion. But let's say the nostrils. That would be the rupa portion, the material portion, the physicality, matter. And the mind is the nama portion, the mind that is observant, and the mind that sees this, the mind that is aware of it, perceiving it, attentive to it, which requires you to have intentionality to maintain that attention there. There you go, nama. That's the nama group. Nama group are, you have feeling, you have perception, you have intention, you have attention, and then you have contact. The contact is what we're talking about, and that is where you can identify nama rupa. Guess what? As you're doing this, there is no room for you to drift into sankhara land, to become passionate, to become agitated, to become perplexed. It does not allow any entry point, not even edgewise, for you to be overwhelmed by, let's say, emotionality. Now, this requires you to really have a commitment towards the practice. And this is where majority of the people that, want to practice the path of meditation proper that Lord Buddha taught fail. Most people fail. Why? Because it requires tremendous, especially now. Today's culture lacks commitment. A person, let's say a lay person, a householder, who's married, who has a wife and children, has more commitment, in my book, than somebody who goes and shaves their head and dons the robes of a bhikkhu, but do not practice. Commitment doesn't come in a certain package, in a certain way, in a certain, Commitment means sticking to it. There's a book I read some years ago on how to be efficient and understand yourself. So it was like a self-help book. I think, what was her name? I think Layla Lowndes, something like that, an author. There's a term that I read in it, and it was, she made it up. She says, I am making this up. Stick-to-itiveness. She turned it into a noun. Stick to it. A command that turned into, she put some hyphens in between, and then at the end, ness at the end. So there we go, the suffix completes it as a noun. So stick-to-itiveness. That's another way of saying commitment. The commitment that you have with the breath, for example, or establishing yourself, grounding yourself in the body. By the way, Lord Buddha had a different term for it. Kaya gata sati. Practice. Kaya means the body. Coming back to the body is the shortest way to the deathless, Lord Buddha says. And he doesn't say this once. I translated this, in just the Anguttara Nikaya. He says this again and again and again. And they're not that long suttas in the beginning, the first and second books especially, of the Anguttara Nikaya, numerical discourses. As if that's not enough, then you have Venerable Anuruddha, who's asked again and again as to how he has attained arahantship, freedom. Again and again he says, the body, the body, the body. Grounding your awareness in the body. That is the best way to address the sankharas, not just the sankharas, mind you. Because once you have grounded yourself, now again, Lord Buddha has, you can call it the cliche way, the Buddhist way of doing the practice. And this is different than pranayama, by the way. It's not the same thing. There's no prana, life force, this and that emphasis in Buddhism. Because that simply is trying to perpetuate life after life after life. There's no freedom from that. You're using the breath to understand and to break the chains of samsara, to no longer have to suffer birth, death, and everything in between, simply by following the breath. Again, that was one technique. He used many others, but you can use your own version of it. One thing that I would teach even patients as a therapist, I would say, people would come at the time and they would say, I become overwhelmed when I get this phone call, or when I speak to my boss or supervisor, what should I do? And I would tell them, you're at a desk? They say, yes. Okay, could you stop what you're doing? Push yourself against the desk, so your, wheelchair, you just pull back, take your shoes off, look down. If you're wearing socks, take them off. You're in your office, right? Take them off and look at your toes as you wiggle them. Let them say hello to you. You have pulled yourself out of the made-up cocoon of fear. That was like impending doom because of this phone call that you're about to get from your supervisor, or what it might turn into, this conversation, the fear, the worries. Before you enter, your house and you know that your spouse is angry or something, let's say, or you're simply conjuring up all these nonsensical images in your head because of tendencies from the past. So I'm not saying we should completely deny the fact that karma exists. Of course it does. But you're not a play toy, a plaything. You're not a toy at the hands of Sankara. That's what I'm trying to say, that I totally disagree with Venerable Dagosa's interpretation, which ruined it for billions of Buddhists. Why? Because they attributed that to the past life. No, you can deal with it in the present. That has nothing to do with the past life, because don't forget, karma doesn't just happen in the past, it's happening now. So how you're relating to the Sankara, it means that you are establishing new trend. You are creating new karma now. This is how you can break the chains of sankharas and break yourself free from samsara. So you're not just at the mercy of whatever happens. I have no control. No, that would be not this path, definitely. It's something else. It's not Lord Buddha's path. Is this working?
Brilliant, Bhante. Perfect.
So commitment is the big one that's lacking. And it has everything to do with you. You're not doing it. The committing part, you committing, has everything to do with how significantly important is it for you, to you. Most people have no clue why they meditate. They have no clue. It's just a matter of automatic curiosity. It's like one thing led to another, that's it. Well, I was hanging out with these groups of people, and then I didn't agree with them, so their ideas were different, so I went here, and then now I'm here. There is no difference in my book looking at such a person and seeing them as driftwood. Really. They're floating about like driftwood. Sometimes I walk where I live close to the beach and I see on the rocks, I see driftwood. Who knows how far they've traveled? At least these guys have actually landed. There's hope for these pieces of wood that have drifted for I don't know how long, but I can't say the same thing for these meditator types who don't commit. And it's the silliest things, the excuses they come up with. Basically, they are playing Russian roulette with their life. In fact, it's even worse than that, because there is no, escape. They will die and they will have to repeat the whole cycle again, if and when they do get a human birth, which is a rarity. So they're simply chewing on the sweet dessert of yesterday's good actions of theirs. And so they're basically cashing in on yesterday's good karma, good deeds. But we can't say that. It's definitely going to be repeated. And there's the other big issue. Will the Dhamma be available for them next time they do show up miraculously as a human? Will it still be there? And if it's not, and when it's not if, then that means thousands and thousands upon thousands of lifetimes, again, being butchered as cattle, as other animals, as hungry ghosts. And each one of these lifetimes could be, in some cases, millions of years. People don't consider this. This is not amusement. The Dhamma, we don't study the Dhamma, we don't practice the Dhamma for spending of time. It's an intelligently spent time. Intelligent because I like it and I have no. And you definitely do not practice to simply feel good. That's another misnomer or misguided approach to the Dhamma. The Dhamma has no place for ego. The Dhamma has no place for perpetuating a sense of self. But again, it is the karma of the time. You have a group, a layer of the population of the planet, and it doesn't go with age, by the way. And the individuals who have now been born on this planet and somehow find themselves gravitating towards the Dhamma, majority of them lack commitment. And it is such an individual thing, and no one can force you. Conversely, or in contrast, you have, at the time of Lord Buddha, individuals who were born because of their good intentions and desires to really end suffering. That itself, actually, perpetuated by the presence of a Buddha in the universe, creates such a strong vortex, a gravitational pull, that such beings, their karma gets to such a wonderful fruition stage that they do get reborn as humans, again relying on their actions in the past. And then situations that will take place in such a way where they find themselves to the Dhamma. And you see them again and again and again. One after the other, they become awakened. Now, of course, the mind likes to think that that's what and how it was always like that. It was taking place. Everybody who came to Lord Buddha became an arahant or something. No, we're realists. But the culture or the class of beings that were being born at the time had a different respect towards committing oneself. There was an ownership, there was a responsibility. Earlier I was mentioning to you about a layperson, a householder who has a family, who goes and conducts himself in a way where he's not endangering his livelihood. Why? Because people depend on him. Carrying himself in such a way where his children depend on him. He can easily do something stupid and it'll be locked up. There goes that child's life, as well as everyone else in the family. And his on top of that. No, they realize. So when a person does that, that is superlative commitment. Now, you take that level of commitment, which, by the way, I'm using it as a synonym, as a definition for also taking responsibility. So today's practitioners do not know the meaning of the word responsible. They do not take ownership of their life. That's why I have to keep repeating to them urgency. Lord Buddha's word, samvega. And he was incredible. He was so impeccable and so efficient with the usage of his similes. He says, imagine a person whose head hair is on fire, whose, in those days, men were usually, growing their beards. His hair above his head and his beard, he says, are on fire. Can such a person delay tending to it, extinguishing the fire? We don't have that. The closest, given that example, between a meditator and a family man, I find the latter having urgency, knowing the meaning of the word urgency. You're not living a careless life. There's laziness within a lack of commitment. When you don't take responsibility, that means you're living like, haphazardly. You're just like I'm just like, like a troubadour, like a thing. It's like a dead leaf falling from the tree. You just, or a feather. That's no longer useful to the bird, by the way. Absolutely useless. It would be a nice decoration for somebody's hair. Or to fall into a pile of dung, freshly pooped dung. Useless. But this Dhamma is not useless, simply because people are not taking initiative. There's a distinction. The Dhamma is very much alive, but because we have a class of people, and they are the majority, within this culture, as I said, of Dhamma practice, supposed Dhamma practitioner. And because of them, the Dhamma is fading away. Plus, you have on the other side, you have groups that have been perpetuating themselves as scholarly monks, which there is none in the Dhamma. None. I've never seen anywhere in the suttas, anywhere. You see it later on in the commentaries, the lazy people, I call them, who never wanted to practice. It's easy to talk about, the Dhamma, this and that. Everybody wants to run away from meditating. It's always like that. Why? Because it's lazy. It's easy. It makes you look like smart. It makes you, this is, with titles and all that, followers of similarly stupid people. But hey, it's a big number, so it must be significant. Then you start telling lies so I have, and then nothing. Nothing. But you do have something. That's called this precious human life, and you have the Dhamma. What are you going to do about it? It's not some intellectual curiosity. That's what I'm trying to say. If you could give it just some decent attention like you do give to the color of, or the type of deodorant that you use for your armpits when it's sweaty, if you give that much attention to the Dhamma, I think your life will be amazing. Or the types of socks you're wearing today for work. The attention we give to our attire, to where we go for our, to have a meal with some friends. Which restaurant are we going to try this weekend? If you give that level of attention to the Dhamma, your life would be amazing. But we don't even have that. And it's declining, and the world is supporting that, supporting the decline. Because people have this wrong impression of individualism. It's my thing, it's my life. Meanwhile, they talk about anatta, by the way. That's the odd part, funny part, ridiculous part. You cannot have a strong sense of I, me-ness, I-ness, and at the same time study the Dhamma. They don't work hand in hand. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It never will work. So it requires humility. It requires responsibility. If you put these together, you have commitment. And that's what it takes to stay with the breath, commitment. To stay with the body, commitment. Unlike the emotionality-seeking mind, which is also prevalent today. By the way, you have to substitute it with something. When you're not committed, then you have to bring in the other countermeasure to commitment, and that is becoming emotional. Seeking out passions, seeking out things that are very colorful, the peaks and the valleys of life experience. And Dhamma has nothing to do with that. And that's agitation. Peaks and valleys of emotions are, in essence, agitation. And Nibbana can never even be in that same zip code, in that same vicinity as such a mind. It does not work. But that's what the ego loves. So what I'm doing, if you notice, I'm pulling the rug from underneath every single mumbo-jumbo way of understanding the Dhamma or interpreting the Dhamma and living and leading one's life according to such a nonsensical version of the Dhamma. Because it's not Dhamma. In essence, we started actually last week, right? The Sammaditthi Sutta. This is the absence of Sammaditthi. The absence of right view. So you can go ahead and write a book on right view. You can write actually a whole library of books on right view. And you will be as close to right view as a spoon is to a hot soup. You will never taste it. Never ever. Actually, the spoon might be closer than you would be to right view. So this is a challenge. And if there is the urgency, the person will take charge and put their stupidities, their egocentric ways of thinking, self-centeredness aside. Because you can't be self-centered and allow the Dhamma in. It doesn't work. It's like somebody who's self-centered, selfish, not in a good way, and being a loving father, a loving husband. It's impossible. Impossible. Because there are times where you have to leave yourself out to maintain the relationship with a woman, with your child, and vice versa, obviously. Requires you so much, from you so much, to give up of that meanness. So many times in your life you're going to say, well, I want this, I would have preferred this over that, but I know that this means a lot more to you. And I can do that later on, it's okay. So you don't make yourself a priority at that point because it's not that important. Something else is, something bigger. When you dig deep into that, you'll see that there's some elements of metta there. Metta doesn't show up because you're doing a metta retreat, by the way. In your interactions with people, that's when metta shows up. Not in a meditation retreat, I guarantee it. I've seen it. I'm amazed at the kindness that I see in people in their relationships with each other. And I'm touched. Sometimes it moves me to tears. Seeing the aliveness of metta. And I shake my head because there I was, let's say, sometime earlier, and I was there would be another teacher present or somebody who's known around the world as being a metta teacher par excellence. And I see her acting like a fool, acting like a buffoon when it comes to human relations. Crude. It's like a mad bull inside a china shop type of mad. And you desperately are trying to interpret that as some form of metta because of the reputation, and you see there's none. No humanity. That's another word for metta, having humanity. Another word for it is consideration. Decency is another word for metta. It doesn't need any of these labels. Lord Buddha didn't walk around like a Formula One driver or with the tags on him, like with the sponsors. Metta, this, that, Karuna, this. He never had any of those labels on. But he was the embodiment of all these, and wisdom, and determination, and commitment. And he was embodying what you and I should embody. Not could, but should embody. That's how I would Makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
No, Bhante.
Okay.
I had a follow-up question, but then you answered it towards the end.
Really?
It was yeah,
Okay.
brilliant. Yeah.
So if you wanted to, I can.
No.
Okay.